Lucas had never believed in ghosts, and Mara never feared the dark, but when they stepped into the neon-lit bar at the end of the alley, something alive was waiting for them, something that didn't want to let them leave. What they saw inside would haunt them forever. I didn't mean to stay out so late, but the streets were strangely empty, and the neon glow of the bar at the end of the alley drew me in like a magnet. I had walked past it dozens of times before, but tonight something about it seemed different. The sign flickered intermittently, half-broken letters casting jagged shadows on the cracked pavement. Even from the outside I could feel a strange pull, a quiet insistence that I come closer. The air around the entrance smelled faintly of damped wood and something metallic, like blood left to dry. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the handle. A chill ran down my spine, but I couldn't look away. Inside, the bar was dim, almost pitch black in some corners, with a single row of flickering yellow lights above the counter. Dust hung in the air, thick and suffocating, yet there was a strange warmth, a soft hum of life, as if the room itself breathed. The floorboards creaked under my feet, sounding louder than they should, echoing off the walls. I noticed a few scattered patrons, but when I looked closer, I realized they weren't moving in any recognizable way. Their heads turned slowly, almost unnaturally, to follow me, their blank eyes reflecting the light like shards of broken glass. I felt my pulse quicken and tried to ignore them, but a sense of unease settled deep in my chest, a knot that refused to loosen. I moved toward the far end of the bar, hoping to find a seat and some sense of normalcy. The counter was scratched deeply in long, jagged lines, like someone had clawed at the wood in a blind panic. I didn't want to think about what had caused them. I settled onto a stool, my hands gripping its edges, and tried to focus on something else, anything else. That's when I noticed the bartender. He appeared silently, gliding rather than walking, his movements too slow, deliberate. Pale skin stretched tightly over sharp bones, and his eyes, they didn't meet mine. They flickered with some strange inner light, unreadable and hollow. He placed a glass in front of me without a word. I hadn't ordered it. The liquid inside was dark, thick, with a faint shimmer that made it look almost alive. I wanted to push it away, to get up and leave, but my body felt heavy, as if the bar itself had gripped me in place. I took a tentative sip. The taste was bitter, metallic, crawling along my tongue and settling cold in my stomach. Then I heard it, a faint whisper at the edge of hearing, just behind me. I turned sharply, but no one was there. The shadows along the walls seemed to pulse, growing longer, curling inward, almost reaching toward me. A chill washed over me. A chill washed over me. The music, soft and almost melodic, came from nowhere I could see. A haunting tune that tugged at my memories, making my head throb with a strange, sickening familiarity. Something moved in the corner of my eyes, a figure, hunched and twisting, whispering to itself. I blinked, and it vanished, leaving only a dark smudge on the floor. My heart pounded, and I realized my breathing had become shallow, frantic. I tried to stand, tell myself it was nothing, but every step I took toward the door felt slower, heavier, like wading through water. And then, from the mirror behind the bar, I saw it, a reflection that wasn't mine, pale, grinning far too wide, eyes dark and endless, staring at me with a hunger that made my stomach churn. I froze, unable to tear my eyes away. The whispers grew louder, now surrounding me, filling my skull with words I couldn't understand but felt in every nerve, every muscle. The shadows twisted faster, and the air grew thick, almost choking me. I wanted to scream, to run, to do anything to escape, but my limbs refused to obey. The figure in the corner appeared again, closer this time, its form jagged, broken, whispering my name in a tone that made the hairs on my arms rise. The bartender smiled at me then, and I could see it clearly for the first time, teeth blackened and sharp, a grin too wide for a human mouth. The glass in front of me trembled slightly, and I realized the liquid inside reflected my face, but twisted, hollow, smiling back with a hunger that was not mine. My pulse hammered in my ears. I wanted to leave, but the door now seemed miles away, swallowed by the shadows that had stretched and warped in the dim light. And then I noticed it, a scratch on the mirror behind the bar, slow, deliberate, forming letters that looked like they had been etched from inside the glass itself. Stay with us. My stomach turned, my hands shook. Something cold pressed against my ankle, brushing slowly upward. I didn't dare look down. The music swelled, the shadows writhed, and I realized with a sickening certainty that this night, this bar, was not going to let me leave. I tried to convince myself it was just my imagination, that the shadows and whispers were the result of exhaustion and late-night nerves. But every instinct in my body screamed at me that something was horribly wrong. The patrons, or whatever they were, stood motionless, yet I felt their attention like cold fingers brushing along my spine. Their blank, glassy eyes followed me wherever I moved, unmoving but impossible to ignore. I wanted to look away, to focus on the counter, on the drink before me, anything that would anchor me to reality. But the bar seemed to pulse with life, a silent rhythm I could feel deep in my chest. I took a cautious step closer to the music, trying to locate its source. Each footfall on the creaking floorboards echoed unnaturally loud, as if the room itself were amplifying my presence. The closer I got, the heavier the air became, thick and humid, curling into my lungs with a metallic taste. It made my head throb and my stomach twist. Something brushed against my arm, a faint, icy touch, but when I looked, no one was there. The shadows along the walls seemed to twitch and stretch, reaching for me, vanishing whenever I tried to focus on them. The bartender appeared silently beside me. He moved without a sound, his eyes still not meeting mine. His skin looked almost translucent under the dim light, the veins visible, pulsing slowly. The glass in his hand trembled slightly, though he made no move to offer it to anyone. I noticed his shadow on the floor. It didn't align with his movements. It stretched far longer than it should, bending and curling as if alive, flickering toward the corner of the room. I tried to leave, telling myself I had to get out, that this was just a nightmare I could escape from. But when I moved toward the door, it seemed farther away than before. The air thickened with each step, pressing against my chest, making it harder to breathe. Then I heard its scratches along the floor, soft but deliberate, like nails on wood. They circled around me, stopping whenever I spun around. I saw nothing, only the dark stretch of floorboards and the flickering lights. Yet I could feel the movement, feel the presence behind me, patient and deliberate. Something caught my eye in the mirror behind the bar. I froze. My reflection wavered, stretching and twisting as if the glass itself were melting. Then I saw another face, pale and hollow, staring back at me from the corner of the mirror. Its eyes were black, deep wells of emptiness, and its mouth stretched wider than humanly possible. My own lips felt frozen in place, my heartbeat hammering in my ears as I realized the reflection was not entirely mine. It moved slightly out of sync with me, as if mocking my terror. I stumbled back, nearly falling over a chair that wasn't there a moment before. The shadows on the walls writhed and twisted, forming grotesque shapes, faces, hands, figures that crawled along the surface like insects. The whispers returned, louder now, weaving through my thoughts, making it hard to think. I could feel them inside my skull, pressing against my brain, insisting, urging. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. My own voice had betrayed me, leaving me helpless, exposed to whatever waited in this cursed place. The music swelled and dipped with a rhythm I could feel in my bones. It wasn't coming from any speaker I could see. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, vibrating through the bar itself. The figures, the patrons, began to move slowly toward me, gliding across the floor like smoke, faces blank, yet somehow smiling. Their presence was suffocating, the pressure of their gaze unbearable. I tried to run again, but the floor beneath me felt sticky, pulling at my shoes, at my body, anchoring me in place. Then I saw it in the corner of the room. A door I hadn't noticed before, small and partially hidden behind the shelves of dusty bottles. From beneath it, a low hum escaped, rhythmic and hypnotic. I couldn't look away. The whispers seemed to pull me toward it, as if something behind that door needed me. I wanted to resist, to turn and fight my fear, but the bar had me. Every instinct to flee was drowned out by the urge to see what lurked beyond. And as I stepped closer, the floorboards beneath the door groaned. A shadow stretched across the threshold, black and jagged, reaching toward me with long, spindly fingers. I froze, chest tight, as the whispering intensified. Then I noticed the glass in my hand, the one I hadn't touched since the first sip. Ripples formed across its surface, reflecting the shadow in the doorway and inside. I saw dozens of pale faces pressed against an invisible barrier, grinning at me, their mouths wide, teeth black and sharp, as if inviting me to join them. I couldn't stop staring at the small door behind the bar. Something about it called to me, a low, insistent pull that made my skin crawl and my pulse race. The whispers had grown louder, surrounding me from every corner of the room, threading through my thoughts, tugging at my sanity. I tried to ignore them, to convince myself that it was a trick of the mind, a combination of exhaustion and fear. But every instinct screamed that this was real, that whatever lay beyond that door was waiting for me, patient and deliberate. The bartender was gone, vanished as silently as he had appeared. I took a shaky step toward the door, my hands trembling, my breath shallow. The floor beneath me seemed to shift, the wood groaning as if alive. Shadows stretched along the walls, twisting in unnatural ways, crawling toward me, then recoiling when I tried to focus on them. The air was thick, heavy, almost wet, clinging to my skin and filling my lungs with a metallic temps I couldn't identify. My stomach churned, and a sense of nausea swept over me, but still, I moved forward. I reached the door. It was cold to the touch, the wood slick beneath my fingers. The hum behind it was faint but insistent, vibrating through my bones. The sound made my head spin and my chest tighten. I hesitated, wondering if I should turn back, if running out into the empty streets might save me from whatever waited in the darkness. But something, a whisper, a tug at the edge of my mind, urged me onward. I opened the door. The stairwell beyond was narrow and steep, descending into darkness so complete it seemed to swallow the weak light from above. Each step groaned beneath my weight, echoing into the black below. I tried to stop, telling myself I shouldn't go further, that I had no idea what awaited me. But my feet moved of their own accord, carrying me downward into a cold, suffocating silence. The air grew colder with every step, wrapping around me like icy fingers, and my heartbeat thundered in my ears. At the bottom of the stairs, the narrow passage opened into a small room lined with mirrors. The dim light from above reflected endlessly, multiplying shadows and faces in a dizzying array of reflections. I froze, my stomach twisting. My own reflection stared back at me, pale and wide, but it was wrong. Its movements lagged behind mine, mocking me, stretching its smile into something unnatural, cruel. Every mirror showed something different. Some faces twisted in agony, others grinning, some pale and hollow, others dark and empty, as if they held nothing but shadows. I stepped closer to one of the mirrors, drawn by a mix of fear and fascination. The air here was heavier, almost suffocating, and the whispers had become chanting, low and rhythmic, vibrating through my skull. My reflection blinked, and I blinked, but the reflection didn't. Its eyes were fixed on me, unblinking, dark and hollow, full of a hunger I couldn't comprehend. I felt a chill creep along my spine, my body frozen with dread, unable to move. Then I noticed the scratches. They were etched deeply into the floor and the walls, hundreds of marks forming strange, jagged symbols that made no sense, yet somehow felt familiar. My heart raced. I could hear faint scuttling noises behind me, soft and deliberate, like nails dragging across the wood. I spun around. The stairwell had vanished, or maybe it had never been there. In its place, shadows pressed against the walls, hunched, moving slowly, creeping toward me without sound. I glanced back at the mirrors. Hundreds of pale hands pressed against the glass from the other side, leaving smudges and streaks like fingerprints on wet paint. Faces pressed against the surface, mouths opening wide in silent screams. One mirror fogged, and a message appeared, traced from the inside. "Join us." My stomach flipped. I wanted to run, to leave, but my legs refused to obey. The room seemed to contract, the walls closing in, forcing me toward the mirrors, toward the faces that stared at me with impossible hunger. I tried to tear my gaze away, but something in me, some part I didn't recognize, was drawn forward. The chanting whispered my name, each syllable striking my bones, urging me to step closer, to touch the glass. I could feel the cold pressing against my fingertips as I reached out, unable to stop. The moment I touched the mirror, the surface rippled like water, and for a fleeting second I thought I saw myself on the other side, pale, grinning, eyes black and hollow, reaching toward me with hands that seemed alive. I recoiled, stumbling backward, gasping for air. The shadows on the walls surged, flickering and twisting, almost solid, crawling toward me. The mirrors multiplied their faces, pressing them closer, closer, until the room felt impossibly small, suffocating, alive with their silent screams. My heart raced uncontrollably, and I realized I was utterly alone in a place that wasn't meant for the living, a place that wanted me. And then I heard a low, wet breath, coming from the mirror directly in front of me, followed by a scraping sound that made my blood run cold. I wanted to scream, but my voice had been stolen. Something in the reflection smiled wider, its grin stretching beyond reason, and I knew, with sickening certainty, that whatever was behind that glass wasn't just waiting for me. It was patient, hungry, and it knew I was here. I ran back upstairs, my hands trembling, every nerve screaming for me to get out. But when I reached the bar, the room had changed. The walls seemed closer, pressing inward, dark shadows pooling at the corners like living things. The dim lights flickered, but they didn't illuminate the way they had before. They cast strange, angular patterns that seemed to shift when I looked directly at them. The patrons, if they could even be called that, were no longer in their seats. They had risen, gliding slowly toward me, their movements too fluid, too precise, like smoke given shape. Their eyes followed me, blank, hollow, yet somehow intelligent, calculating, watching every twitch of my body. The bartender was nowhere to be seen, replaced by a wall of darkness that pulsed as though breathing. My chest tightened. I wanted to turn, to run, but the shadows along the floor twisted beneath my feet, snaking around my ankles, clinging to me with icy insistence. I felt my pulse hammering in my ears, my thoughts scattering in fear. Yet a part of me wanted to see what would happen next, a perverse curiosity that had me frozen in place. I moved toward the door, desperate to leave, but it wouldn't budge. No matter how much force I applied, the handle felt anchored in a different reality, heavier than iron, immovable. I tried the windows. They were black, unyielding, reflecting only the twisted shadows behind me. The neon sign outside flickered erratically, casting brief flashes of light, and in those flashes I could swear it spelled my name, bright staccato letters carved into the night. The whispers had returned, louder, more insistent, threading through my mind like thin needles. They weren't random now. They were chanting, their rhythm in sync with my heartbeat, an inhuman melody that made my teeth ache. The patrons, the shadows, the pulsing darkness, they were all synchronized to it. I could feel it pressing against my skull, an oppressive weight that made my thoughts sluggish and my legs tremble. I tried to shout, to scream, anything to break the grip, but my voice was gone, stolen by the unseen presence that ruled this place. I backed into a corner, scanning desperately for anything that might offer escape. The bar stools had started to move on their own, sliding across the floor, turning to face me. Their legs scraped softly on the wood, a sound that made my stomach turn. The floorboards themselves groaned and buckled. shadows pooling where the legs met the ground, as though the room was alive and aware of my fear. I could see faint shapes forming in the darkened corners, humanoid, yet grotesque, thin and elongated, reaching toward me with fingers that ended in jagged points. Then the bartender appeared, standing silently over me, a dark silhouette against the flickering lights. His hands were empty this time, but the grin on his pale face was enough. It stretched wider than humanly possible, teeth blackened and sharp, reflecting the dim light in cruel glints. He didn't move closer, yet I felt his presence everywhere, as if the shadows themselves carried his will. My eyes fell to the glass I had been given earlier. It sat on the counter, untouched, rippling with the reflection of the room. And inside it, I saw my own face, or at least, something that looked like me. Pale eyes, black, grinning in a way that made my stomach lurch. I stumbled back, tripping over nothing, and when I looked up, the bartender's reflection had multiplied across every surface. Mirrors, windows, even the empty bottles on the shelves now carried my twisted likeness, smiling, watching, waiting. The shadows reached toward me, spreading along the walls, across the floor, curling around the bar itself. I could feel their touch, cold and heavy, pressing against my shoulders and arms, restricting movement. I tried to fight, to push against them, but it was as if the bar itself had taken hold of me. My vision blurred, and the chanting of the whispers became deafening. Every beat of my heart seemed to echo in the room, synchronized with the pulsing darkness that consumed the air. Then I noticed the floorboards beneath my feet. They were scratched. Hundreds of jagged lines, forming a pattern I couldn't understand. And in the midst of it, faint footprints pressed into the wood, small and pale, leading in a circle around me. I realized with sickening certainty that they weren't mine. Something had been following me, watching, waiting for me to arrive. Something was inside this bar, moving just out of sight. Patient, hungry. I tried to turn, tried to find any way out, but the room had contracted, the walls stretching closer, the ceiling lowering. Shadows twisted into shapes that almost resembled people's faces, grinning, bodies hunched, reaching for me, for the warmth of my living flesh. And then I felt it, a touch on my arm, cold and heavy, not solid yet terrifyingly real. My breath caught in my throat as I realized the room wasn't just haunted, it was alive, aware, and I was its prey. I woke up on the bar floor, my head pounding, every nerve screaming in pain. The neon sign above buzzed weakly, flickering with an irregular rhythm. At first I thought it was over. Relief surged through me, thinking I had somehow passed out, that the horrors of the night were gone, and that I was alive. But the silence around me was wrong to complete, too deliberate. The air smelled faintly of wet wood and metallic Thames, the same I had noticed the first time I entered. My stomach churned as I realized the room looked empty, as if nothing had happened, yet the memories of the shadows, the whispers, the reflections, burned in my mind like a brand. I pushed myself up slowly, eyes scanning the bar. Everything seemed normal, the bottles on the shelves, the stools lined up neatly, the floorboards intact. My hands shook, my chest heaving as if I had run a mile, though I hadn't moved. The glass I had been given was gone, and the bar itself seemed almost too clean, too perfect. I dared to hope that it had all been a nightmare, a trick of my mind in the late hours, fueled by exhaustion and fear. Then I noticed the note. It lay on the counter, written in smudged, dark red letters. I approached it cautiously, hands trembling. The words were simple, yet horrifying. "We'll be waiting." My pulse spiked, my breath caught. I scanned the room, expecting to see shadows moving, figures emerging from the corners, the bartender returning with his unnatural grin. But nothing stirred. The silence pressed against my ears, making the space around me feel impossibly large, impossibly empty, as if the bar itself were holding its breath. I stumbled toward the exit, desperate to leave. The alley outside looked normal at first, glance dimly lit, quiet, familiar. Relief surged, and I stepped forward, telling myself the nightmare was over. But then I caught a reflection in a puddle on the pavement. My own reflection stared back at me, but it was wrong. Pale eyes blackened and a smile that stretched far too wide, too cruel. My stomach flipped. I spun around, heart hammering, but the alley was empty. The neon sign of the bar was gone. Brick walls stretched endlessly in either direction, unfamiliar, unyielding. I ran, stumbling down streets that should have led to safety, but every corner, every turn brought me back to the same alley, the same walls. It was as if the city itself had shifted, rearranged to trap me. Panic surged, my legs trembling, lungs burning. The whispers returned soft, urgent, calling my name from just beyond my hearing, threading through my thoughts, pressing against my skull. I couldn't run from them. I couldn't hide. I was trapped in this labyrinth of streets that weren't quite real, and the bar was somewhere out there, waiting. Then I noticed the shadows. They weren't attached to anything solid, moving independently along the edges of buildings, stretching unnaturally, creeping toward me without sound. Every instinct told me to flee, yet my feet felt heavy, reluctant. I realized with horror that I didn't know if the bar had ever truly been a physical place or something else. Something that existed between reality and the dark corners of my mind, waiting to pull me back, patient and eternal. My reflection in the puddle changed again, shifting slightly, grinning wider, its eyes glimmering with a dark hunger. It moved on its own, reaching toward me, beckoning. I stumbled backward, heart hammering, but I could feel its gaze on me from every reflective surface, every shadow, every darkened corner. The realization hit me with cold, crushing certainty. I was not free. The bar, the shadows, the whispers, they were all still there, somewhere, waiting for me to return. I tried to scream, but my voice caught in my throat. The night stretched endlessly, streets looping, walls unyielding, shadows creeping. I knew I could never escape, that the bar would always find me, patiently, silently, hungering. The final whisper floated through the alley, soft and cruel. My name promised, inevitable. And somewhere behind me, just out of sight, I felt a presence brush against my shoulder, cold, heavy, and alive. I didn't dare look. I couldn't, but I knew it was waiting.